Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress. In 3 days it will all start in London. The World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. On Friday, November 9th, the first game will be played. On Chess to Impress we have been counting down from 100 days to the great match by looking at the first 46 events in the history of the World Championships. Carlsen-Caruana is number 47. We've arrived in 2013. Viswanathan Anand is the 15th world champion and he defended his title in that year against 22-year-old Magnus Carlsen. How did that match come about? For the first time since 1962, the Candidates Tournament was held as an 8-player double round-robin event. It was held in the Institution of Engineering and Technology in London, yes, also in London, in March 2013. These were the 8 participants. Boris Gelfand qualified by being the runner-up of the last World Championship match. 3 players qualified on rating: Carlsen, Aronian and Kramnik. 3 players qualified through the World Cup. Peter Svidler won the World Cup, Grishuk was second and Ivanchuk was third. Temur Rajabov was the organizer's wildcard. One of the main sponsors was from Rajabov's home country of Azerbaijan. This is the final table of the Candidates Tournament. Magnus Carlsen was the winner, but there was a lot of drama in the last few rounds. As you can see, Carlsen finished on the same number of points as Vladimir Kramnik. Carlsen lost in the last round with white against Peter Svidler, so Kramnik only needed a draw as black against Vasily Ivanchuk, but he lost. So both Carlsen and Kramnik finished in joint first place, and Carlsen won the tournament because he had more wins, as you can see in the last column. He won 5 games versus Kramnik 4. So Magnus Carlsen qualified to challenge Viswanathan Anand for the world title. The All India Chess Federation was given a first option to organize the match. Later, Paris in France was also announced as a candidate, but FIDE confirmed Chennai as the venue. Chennai, the home city of Anand. The match was held in the Hyatt Regency Hotel, at walking distance from Anand's home. 12 games would be played with a rapid and blitz tiebreak in case of a 6-all score. Here we see both players in action, the world champion Anand on the left and the challenger Carlsen on the right. The first 4 games, as you can see here, were drawn, but then Carlsen won back-to-back rook endgames in game 5 and game 6. Game 7 and 8 were drawn, and in game 9 Anand had the white pieces and he was really fighting for his last chance. He had to win that game to have a chance of retaining his world title. In this video we're going to have a look at that game. Game 9, let's get into it. It was played on the 20th of November 2013, white Anand, black Carlsen. And for the first time in the match, Anand opens with d4. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, and Carlsen plays the Nimzo Indian defense. f3, a very sharp system against the Nimzo Indian. d5, a3, Carlsen took, b takes, and c5. A lot of tension there with those pawns. Anand solved some of the tension. He took on d5, and here knight takes d5 is the most common move, but Carlsen deviates from the main line and he takes with a pawn. e3, and now c4. In the old days this move would be seen as too dangerous, as white will get a serious attack after the e3, e4 push. For this video I'm using the comments from Anish Giri in the magazine New in Chess. Anand played knight e2, knight c6 and g4, gaining space on the king side where the future attack will take place. In the long run, white is aiming for e3, e4, as Giri explains. Carlsen castled, bishop g2, knight a5, Anand castled, knight b3 and rook a2. A subtle decision, writes Giri, where to put the rook. There's also something to be said to play rook b1. In some lines it's good that the rook protects the bishop on c1. But Anand played rook a2. b5 from Carlsen, advancing his queenside pawns, hoping for the best. In general, the black strategy in such positions is quite simple. He should pretend he doesn't care at all that he gets mated, create some silly counterplay on the queen side and hope that white will not find a forced mate. Very interesting to hear Geary's thoughts about this. He should pretend he doesn't care at all. That's funny. Knight g3, a5. Carlsen keeps going forward on the queen side, looking for counterplay, and Anand plays on the king side with g5. Knight back to e8 and e4. Now Carlsen took on c1, and Geary says, exchanging his active knight, fearing that the knight might end up doing nothing on the nice b3 square. Queen takes c1 and rook a6 from Carlsen. e5, the most straightforward. White wants to follow up with f4 and f5, as Geary explains. Knight c7, Carlsen decides to go all out for counterplay. As Geary explains, Carlsen's initial intention was g6, then f4 and knight g7 to stop white's pawns. But then he noticed the powerful shift of focus by white's major pieces. He showed this variation in the press conference after the game. Rook b2, rook b6, and then queen b1. Then queen d7 is the only move, which is terribly awkward, says Geary, but it's still hard for white to do anything. For example, f5, knight takes f5, and white can take on f5 with the knight, with the rook, or with the bishop, explains Geary, but in all cases black seems to be holding his ground. Knight c7 was the move from the game. Carlsen goes all out for counterplay. f4. Now white will have all the fun, writes Geary. b4. A takes b4, and this move, swapping a pair of rooks, was criticized by many strong players. f5 was seen as more dangerous for black. And a4 was a move suggested by Grandmasters Nigel Short and Maxime Vacher-Lagrave. White has such a dangerous initiative that he can afford one slow move. Black would have a tough time here to create counterplay. Nice move a4. But Anand took on b4. Carlsen took back, and indeed a pair of rooks was swapped. As Nigel Short explained it, if black crashes through, he queens a pawn. If white crashes through, it is checkmate. What a game this is. f5, there we go. Anand goes forward. And b3 after 25 minutes of thinking by Carlsen. With just one rook left for white, the b-pawn is a serious asset, explains Geary. White would like to involve all his major pieces in the attack, but then the b-pawn will be a nuisance. Queen f4 from Anand after 40 minutes of thinking. Geary says that Anand must have underestimated the knight a6 to c7 to e8 defense. He gives h4 as the alternative. White should have played more cautiously. He can take his time and push his h-pawn to h5, explains Geary. There's no forced mate yet, but it is not clear how black should proceed. This would have put Carlsen under a lot of pressure, as black does not really have counterplay with his pieces so badly coordinated. Black's army is not very well coordinated. So h4 would have been a better option. But after a long think, queen f4 was Anand's choice. Knight c7, hurrying back to the e8 square. Queen h4 was Kasparov's suggestion here, keeping the tension, but Anand decided to go for it. f6. g6 and queen h4, with an obvious threat, queen h6 and queen g7 checkmate. Knight e8 by Carlsen, covering the g7 square against that checkmate idea. All black's pieces are on the back rank, but he has that protected passed pawn on b3, which white has to keep an eye on. Queen h6, b2, and rook f4. Anand forces the play completely, intending rook h4 and then checkmate on h7. Geary gives knight e2 as an alternative, followed by knight f4 to continue the initiative. But Anand plays the very forcing move, rook f4, And Carlsen, queen this pawn. He has an extra queen, he has 2 queens now. And here Anand should have played bishop f1 to shield the check. The correct and only move. White's threat is still rook h4 and queen h7. Checkmate. And black plays then queen d1. Rook h4 and queen h5 only move. Giving back the queen is the only way to prevent checkmate. But remember, it is black's second queen. That queen was a pawn not so long ago, so it's not really a full queen that he gives away. Knight takes h5 is the variation. G takes, rook takes, with checkmate threat on h7, and then bishop f5, protecting h7. This game should end in a draw. Bishop h3, bishop g6. There are many variations, but this should end in a draw. But after b8 queen check, Anand played knight f1. He said in a press conference afterwards that he saw a winning variation, that he got excited, but as soon as he played knight f1 that he saw that it was a blunder. Anish Giri writes, I perfectly know the feeling. When a win is so needed and not there, any hallucination is welcome. Calculating bishop f1 over and over, Anand could not find a win, and then when he suddenly thought of blocking a check with a knight, he thought he had found it. Obviously, there was no emotional energy left to double check, and only when he made the move did he realize what he had done. As Anand explained himself, the problem is that the knight is no longer covering the h5 square, and that's why this variation does not work. What Anand had seen, and he showed this variation in the press conference, is that queen d1 now does not work. Because of rook h4, then the queen has to interpose to stop the checkmate on h7, rook takes, g takes, and then knight e3. Nice move. Threatening to take on d5, so bishop e6, and then bishop takes d5 anyway. White is a rook down, but is winning. The threat is back, and then checkmate on h7. And Anand said you probably have to give the queen now with black. Because if you take with the bishop, then there is knight f5, and black is powerless against knight e7 check. For example, bishop e6, knight e7 check, and you cannot go to h8 because of checkmate. So after knight e7 check, you have to give the queen for the knight. White is winning. So after knight f1, queen d1 does not work, but the other move does work, queen e1, and Carlsen found it. He removed himself from the board, let Anand sit and suffer, and when Carlsen returned, Anand resigned. Rook h4 now does not work, because there is queen takes h4, and after queen takes h4, black is simply up a rook. Garry Kasparov tweeted that Anand knew that keeping the queens on the board was his best chance to win against Carlsen, but not 3 queens, Kasparov said. He overdid it. There was 1 queen too many on the board. In the press conference, an Indian journalist asked, you have had many hat-trick wins in your career. You are 3 points down now. Will it be possible for you to win 3 games in a row and get the match into a tie-break? Anand gave a wry smile and said, the situation does not look very good. And indeed, Anand did not manage to win 3 games in a row. Game 10 with Carlsen behind the white pieces was a draw, and that meant that Carlsen had got to 6.5 points and was the 16th official and undisputed world champion. Anand had to answer questions, was he going to retire? And he said, no, I'm not going to retire. And he showed why not, because he won the next candidates tournament and qualified for a rematch against Carlsen. I'll tell you all about that one in the next video. Hope you enjoyed this video and that you will keep counting down the last few days away with me to the Carlsen-Caruana match. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. If you like the video and the series, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. The link to the series is here. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.